Good morning, everyone. Please, can you kindly confirm by a show of hands if you can hear me? Can you hear me? Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for the delay. We are deeply sorry for the delay. My name is Nkem Umadi Onyedika, and today we are having a webinar on legal perspectives on AI, addressing risks, gaps, and governance challenges. This webinar is hosted by Wigwe and Partners, and having seen the need and the rising use of AI, they have thought to organize this webinar to enlighten the public on the risks and governance challenges associated with the use of AI. First, before we begin, please, if you have any questions, you can put them in the comments in the chat box. We would get to them as in the course of this webinar. And please note that this webinar is also being live streamed on YouTube as well. I think the link will be posted on the chat box shortly. So, artificial intelligence is revolutionizing industries worldwide, but its rapid adoption brings significant legal and ethical challenges, and it is gradually becoming a tool for carrying out various tasks, from optimizing data to revamping speech to learning new things. Everyone in this room, I think everyone in this room can attest to the fact that they have used AI in one way or the other. But then, as with all things, using anything or deploying any new thing, it comes with significant risks and challenges. And we have come here today to understand the legal risks involved with the use and deployment of artificial intelligence. And today we have a lot of experienced AI experts in the room with us. First, we have Mr. Tilewa Oyefeso. He's a partner at the law firm of Wigwe and Partners and a seasoned and well-rounded legal practitioner. As a former Chief Magistrate of Ogun State Judiciary, he brings on board a wealth of experience and expertise cultivated through a distinguished career spanning both the public and private sectors. And in his capacity as a partner at Wigwe and Partners, he supervises the corporate commercial team, contributing significantly to the growth of the practice. And he wields strong expertise in advising on various practice areas such as litigation, intellectual property, dispute resolution, entertainment law, and the likes. Mr. Oyefeso is also a member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria and a member of BRIPAN. Mr. Oyefeso, thank you for joining us on this session, and we are glad to draw from your wealth of experience today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, sir. We also have Emma Diong Lawrence. Emma Diong is an associate at Wigwe and Partners and a member of the firm's company secretarial unit, as well as its technology law and entertainment law practices. Emma Diong has represented the firm at the 2024 Global Tech for Africa conference, where she shared insights on the intellectual property rights of software developers. And she has a strong passion for corporate governance. Having a strong passion for corporate governance, she has pioneered and organized roundtables and webinars aimed at promoting corporate governance best practices in Nigerian organizations. And she has also authored several articles on various topics, which have been published in Business Day. Emma Diong, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to draw from your wealth of experience.
Thank you very much for having us.
Like I said, we have a whole lot of experts on AI in this panel. We have Mr. David Agbola. He's an astute lawyer with extensive experience in dispute resolution, legal advisory, and startup and technology law. David routinely advises a diverse range of clients on niche areas of law, including labor and employment, mergers and acquisitions, and corporate finance. His other areas of interest include building sustainable practices and applying environmental, social, and governance principles with a particular focus on governance. Mr. David, thank you for joining us today, and we are glad for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Yeah.
Our final panelist for today is Mr. Kingsley Owadara. Mr. Kingsley Owadara is a passionate advocate for responsible AI and AI ethics in Africa, and he believes that artificial intelligence should be developed and deployed for the common good by considering the factors that make them ethical and socially responsible. Mr. Owadara has a background in law and computer engineering and has a deep understanding of the potential impacts of AI on individuals, communities, and the environment. His work has a special focus on Africa, and his experience cuts across academia, industries, and NGO. He is currently a tech policy and research fellow at the Emerging Technology for Emerging Markets. Mr. Kingsley Owadara, thank you for joining us today, and we are glad to draw from a wealth of experience.
Thank you very much again for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, today we would like today's session to be an interactive session where we would have some questions posed to the speakers. But before we go into that, we would have a short presentation just to give us an understanding of AI and what it means and what our topic for today means before we go into the questions. So we would now head on to that presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Just to confirm that you have the slides.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I will just give the prompt so that you can follow.
All right.
I'll just wait for you to put up the first slide before I start. Okay, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you once again for joining this session. So, of course, before we go into the interactive session, I'd like to lay a background into, AI from a legal perspective, right? It's looking at the risks, looking at the gaps, challenges, and then, possible solutions and action plans that stakeholders can implement to have, better deployment of AI in their spaces. So this presentation is going to look at how AI has changed industries and life itself. Then we'll look into the advantages of AI. We'd also consider the risks involved. Then we'd move into the state of regulation on AI in Nigeria, and then mention some recommendations that can be adopted to mitigate some of the risks with AI. So the first thing, next slide, please. Yes, so the first thing to note is that AI has disrupted life and work. So AI is a disruptor, right? And some people might argue, is AI good or is AI bad? But that depends in whose hands it is, right? So AI is a disruptor, can be for good or for bad, depending on how it is utilized. And that's why it's important to put measures in place to control it. Then we also want to understand what is artificial intelligence exactly, because for some people, they might think that all technology is AI, right? But that's not the case. So from the word artificial and intelligence, this is an inanimate system, okay, but it has the capacity to perform human functions, and that's why the word intelligence is attributed to it. So AI systems are those systems that have human functions like thinking, well, not thinking, but problem solving, decision making, learning, right? So sometimes you're having they would have like conversations with generative AI, and then some of its responses just makes it seem as though you were talking to a human being. And that's because these AI systems are fed with large amounts of data, from which it makes its decisions, from which it, draws patterns and communicates with us. So that is artificial intelligence. And we see it play out in so many areas. We see it play out in the legal industry, where legal practitioners are able to use it to review contracts, and even for AI-led tech generators, where it can provide prompts for you in moments. It can help you review your legal briefs, right? And so for legal practitioners, there's the question of hesitancy, as to whether AI would help or whether it wouldn't. And from several researches and surveys carried out in some other jurisdictions, they have said that AI is a catalyst for growth, right? And I think that having that kind of mindset can help legal practitioners to utilize this system more effectively. Okay, and then we even know that in some other jurisdictions as well, they have AI legal teams. So where, in their law practice, there's a dedicated team that, focuses on AI and how AI can serve their law firm. So, and they, in those practices, they have a focus on privacy, data and privacy as regards to AI, or intellectual property considerations as regards to AI, but they do have a dedicated AI legal team in their law firm. Then in other industries as well, like education, media, in education, we see things like chatbots, and virtual assistants. So we are gradually moving into the era of having AI-led tutors. So, not just physical teachers, and I can only imagine how it's going to be like in years and decades from now, where, we might not even need physical teachers, right? Or, there would be a reduced need for that, and you have, more virtual teachers and chatbots. So that is really something to look out for as well. Then in the media and entertainment industry, of course, AI has also been introduced in that industry. So we know that we have AI-generated music, we have AI-generated movie scripts, and we even have, the movie industry, where we have the use of deep fakes, which can produce stunt doubles to augment for the real life actors. So that industry is definitely leveraging artificial intelligence. Then if you look at other industries, agriculture, manufacturing, you have AI tools that help with detection of diseases in agriculture, trying to check the soil temperature, because these industries have understood that there is a limit to human activity, right? With technology, there is so much more that can be done, efficiency and effectiveness. So definitely AI is here to stay and will continue to influence many decisions in many quarters in years to come. So just flowing from that, next slide. Just flowing from that, we want to understand, the advantages of AI are definitely quite obvious. Automating tasks, right? So things that are routine, that take time, or that may seem arduous or hard, difficult. AI tools can be used to automate those tasks, bring up time for you to attend to some other strategic matters that AI cannot really help with, right? Like human reasoning, physical interactions with clients, emotions, things like that AI does not have the capacity for. It frees up time for you to handle those aspects. Okay, and then of course the innovations that are coming out from AI is definitely something to look out for as well. So, but with the advantages of artificial intelligence, we also have the risks. Okay, like Nkem said at the beginning, for one thing that's good, there is also the downsides, and it's important to understand the downsides so that we can have a better leverage of this technology. So we'll look at some of the risks involved with AI. And the first thing to note is privacy violations. And this is a risk because for some AI tools, they, like I said earlier, they make use of large data sets that have been fed into its algorithms, right? And it is from the data that it receives that it's able to give its outputs. So like the saying that goes garbage in, garbage out, right? And there are questions around what data exactly is being fed into these systems for it to make its decisions. Okay, and there are ongoing lawsuits, where parties have complained, about their personal data or their data being used to train AI systems. So there is definitely that risk involved in privacy violations, and it's something that the courts are dealing with and will continue to deal with until we have a framework or a legislation in place to direct how these AI tools should be fed with data. Then we also have the risk of deep fakes, right? So deep fakes come up where AI systems project someone saying something they didn't say or doing something they didn't do, right? So, you have these AI systems creating something that looks like you or someone that looks like you, and there comes the question of misinformation. There comes the question of, impersonation. Okay, so if we're going to move beyond this particular risk of deepfake, it's important to have conversations around it. What regulations can we put in place? How can we drive awareness against the wrong use of deepfakes? Then we also have bias and discriminatory practices. It's another risk of artificial intelligence. Like we said, that some AI tools are fed with data, in order to make their decisions. And so if these AI tools are wired with biases, the wrong kinds of information, it's definitely going to produce biased outcomes. Okay, and we see this in things like hiring processes, right? Where in the human resources sector, in order to make some of their decisions, they might rely on AI tools that have been wired to exclude or eliminate a particular set of people from the hiring process. Automatically, the AI system disqualifies those people, right? So that is a bias. Could be a discriminatory practice. And so if we're going to leverage AI tools, it's important to address that aspect. Then we also have intellectual property considerations, which is similar to the privacy violations we spoke about earlier. I know that in places like the US, there have been cases and there are ongoing cases of creators coming out to say that their works were fed into these AI systems, and then they see traces of their works in certain AI outputs, right? And they're asking the courts to make a determination on whether there has been an infringement on their copyrights. Okay, and of course it's a developing area, and so it will be interesting to see how the law develops in that area as well. Then we have inaccuracies, right? So AI sometimes can be hypothetical, and so it's always important to fact check, right, with the outputs that are produced by these AI systems, because of course, what they're producing depends on the data that they have been fed with, and they've also been trained to produce outcomes that are not real. So sometimes, like we know, they hallucinate and conjure up situations and scenarios that are not even true. Then we also have job loss and displacement, which is a risk. And we know that there are some industries that are more affected by AI than others, right? So industries like people that are financial analysts, administrative workers, human resources, these industries are more affected, even computer programming, because artificial intelligence can, draw up codes from you from scratch. You don't have to start from the beginning. So some industries will be more hit by AI than others, right? And there's no hiding it. Certain tasks will be eliminated from human involvement. And so it's important to have a conversation around how your job or your task can be redefined in such a way that you're not completely eliminated or removed from the scene. Then the final risk, of course, is loss of human skill, right? Before AI came, it was really in the conversation, you have to do many things from the beginning, okay? But with AI, it does a lot of things for you, okay? And so it's important that we discuss some of those challenges. So we go to our next slide, which is on the state of regulations of AI in Nigeria. And it's really a good thing that Nigeria is also in this conversation, right? We are not playing catch up. We are taking proactive steps to ensure that we pull the country, into this rapid development that's happening. So yes, of course, there's not yet an AI specific legislation in Nigeria, but we know that there are other supporting policies, initiatives, and frameworks in place, and eventually we will get to having our own AI specific legislation. But one major achievement that we've had in the era of AI for regulations is the release of the National AI Strategy that was released in August this year. And what that policy document does is to set the tone and the pace for AI development in Nigeria. Okay, so it highlights the principles upon which we will build and develop and deploy our own AI systems, leveraging AI systems from other jurisdictions, right? And that document really emphasizes ethical use of AI, responsible use of AI in a way that's not detrimental to people or to society, but in a way that drives change in a positive way. And really, I think that when we get around to having our own AI legislation or even some other policy documents, a lot will be drawn from that strategy document. Then we have the NDPA, that's the Nigerian Data Protection Act, and its subsequent General Application and Implementation Directive that obligates data controllers and processors to be mindful of data protection laws and public policy as well when they're dealing with emerging technologies like AI to process personal data. So it's good that we're having conversations because AI and data go hand in hand. And so the fact that the commission, the NDPC has come up, to have these policy directives is quite a laudable one. And we also have the Securities and Exchange Commission's rule on robo-advisory services, which was released in 2021, which, amongst other things, directs or monitors the use of AI by capital market operators. And we also have the National Digital Economy Policy and Strategy, another strategy document that shows or rather intimates us of the government's plan to include emerging technologies like AI in its decision making and even to drive change in the public sector. So these and others are some of the regulations we have on ground for AI. And again, like I said, it's quite laudable that Nigeria is taking this initiative to be up to date, to keep up, right, so that we are not left behind. Then finally, final slide, we'll look at some of the recommendations, into how better can we leverage AI. What are the solutions that we can put in place to address some of the gaps and challenges in AI. So the first, like we recommended is having an AI specific legislation, and I'm sure that it's definitely in talks in relevant quarters, and eventually we would see something. So this AI specific legislation will be important to define who the regulator is. Will be important to define the acceptable uses of AI and the unacceptable uses of AI. It would also be important to set up fines and punishments for the wrong use of AI. So we are definitely looking forward to having that law enacted. Then another thing is also the codification of the proposed national AI ethical principles. So codifying these principles in the legislation would also drive better enforcement. of them. Then we also have compulsory annual reporting for companies deploying AI. Okay, so we said having annual reporting to the regulator, right? Just as a company reports to its board of directors on how it was able to mitigate its internal risk during the year. You can also have this for AI because it's an emerging area which is going to only get bigger as the year goes by. And just to ensure that it is ethical and responsible, organizations can be mandated to have an annual audit, internal audits, and then reporting to external stakeholders. Then we also said having amended IP laws, and this is important. And I think that as more cases of violations come out, our laws would be able to answer those questions and, come up with its solutions, right? Its determinations on those issues. So that is also something that we're looking at. And I know that in some other crimes, they're definitely having that conversation. And it will be good to see how the Copyright Act, the Patent Act will be amended to include AI specific provisions. So just as a recap, we began by looking at how AI has changed industries and life itself. And then we looked at some of the advantages of AI. Then we went into the risks of AI. And we also looked at the state of regulations of AI in Nigeria. And finally, mentioned some of the recommendations that we're proposing, to mitigate some of the risks and to have a better leverage of AI systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma Young. I did learn a lot of things, and I believe everyone here had also gotten some things. While you were speaking, I heard you mention that AI is a disruptor, which I quite agree with because, and like you said, AI has, the use of AI has tended to decrease the use of human skills. Nowadays, you find that most often times, once people have the idea that you can use AI to perform these tasks, they most often times will deploy the use of AI. And you also mentioned the problems associated with the use of AI, such as biases, inaccuracies, and loss of human skills. So thank you very much, Emma Young, for that. That's your presentation was quite in-depth and shows your expertise. So thank you for that. We would now go into the interactive session. I don't know if for the viewers or for our listeners, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box, both on Zoom and on YouTube, and we will get to them in the course of the webinar. So first, this question is to everyone, all our speakers. Emma Young has given us a breakdown of the state of AI regulation in Nigeria. So I want to ask, what are the key gaps and challenges in Nigeria's current legal framework for AI, and how can they be addressed? I think, Mr. Oyefeso, if you would like to answer this first.
Okay, thank you. Good morning once again.
Good morning.
Very insightful presentation earlier on. Talking about the gaps and the challenges. One of the major challenges, of course, the obvious one, and that's the elephant in the room, is that there's currently no absolute legal framework for AI in the country. What we have at best is the strategy, which we are trying to build upon. So what we have here is a very huge knowledge gap. And a lot of lawyers are still trying to assimilate and understand this wavelength of artificial intelligence that is the buzz everywhere. So I feel that what we need to do is to do a lot of campaigns where we synthesize ourselves as professionals, and we key into the positive implications of AI for our daily lives. Of course, the earlier speaker had mentioned the impact of artificial intelligence on the legal profession, particularly with respect to automation. So I feel that the legal profession is a prime candidate for automation. We have AI tools like Juro and Avi AI for automation of legal processes. You want to talk about managing contracts, reviewing contracts, and in-depth research and analysis. So my final take on this is that we need to up the ante and work towards having a very strong legal framework that will guide our activities as lawyers and will define borderlines and all of that, so that we can be up and running in terms of utilizing artificial intelligence in today's world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oyefeso. And I quite agree with what you said, that the legal profession is a prime candidate for the use and deployment of AI, and we need to run more campaigns so that we can understand AI and how to infuse this into our practice as legal practitioners. Mr. Owadara, what would you have to say on this? Key gaps and challenges in Nigeria's current legal framework for AI and how they can be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. Are you able to hear me? Let me confirm first.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So I view the question as a pivotal question. Looking at artificial intelligence as though not a new technology, it has been for a very long time, but recently gaining wide adoption. And I feel that it's really called for attention. Yeah, it is I would like call it an open secret that currently Nigeria doesn't have a single comprehensive on artificial intelligence. But I believe that despite the fact that which is basically a gap, I believe that despite the non-availability of a single regulatory provision of framework for artificial intelligence, there are other things that could really help. And first, I would say that which Nigeria has done, made some steps. First is having a comprehensive data protection act, which Nigeria have actually done. And why I see that really key, because if you look at through the Data Protection Act, you see provisions on automated decision making. So while there is no specific mention of a keyword AI or artificial intelligence, automated decision making can actually be, we could expand the definition to fit in, algorithmic decisions, right? AI decisions. So that's the first thing. But other things I really think Nigeria can do, because if you really look at the processes of enacting a law from the scratch to the end in Nigeria, it goes through several stages, and it is really a difficult thing if at this stage Nigeria wants to come up with a comprehensive artificial intelligence act, because the technology, just as Mr. Oyefeso mentioned, people are still struggling to understand. Lawyers are struggling, the regulatory bodies are struggling, are trying to catch up with it. Legislations, key stakeholders are trying to catch up with it, and when they, the more they, the more they work, the more they try to catch up with it. Another new thing is coming, right? New things are coming on board. So what I think that we could really do to be,
Mr. Owadara, we've lost you.
is first, putting up a strategy in the country, putting up a strategy and then putting up a policy. Those things are different. Nigeria have started with a strategy, putting up a national AI strategy. Nigeria once started the national AI policy, which I was part of, but it has not been released. But aside these two things, which gives a foresight of what the country wants to achieve, with the AI, and a policy give a guide how to achieve it. But other things that I think Nigeria could do which other countries have done, would be to amend the current laws, right? The current laws that have to do with, artificial intelligence, or maybe not specifically AI, but adoption of AI in specific industries. Um, Over the world, you see on IP, it's my thing, it's not my thing, and the algorithm trained on my data, it is not yours. So maybe the scope of intellectual property and institutional legal action on that could actually be expanded to accommodate uh, the growing with the growth of AI. We could also, I know that there is current provision for Data Protection Act. There could also be some sort of creating some regulatory oversight. I believe that several ministries, that there are several ministers that are responsible for specific industries in Nigeria. So what I think, what I suggest in this instance that could really be done would be to create some sort of regulatory oversight, just the way CBN does. The policies are released every day. So this regulatory oversight could actually create some sort of usage, right? Some policies on usage of artificial intelligence in such specific sector. And I would want to classify, artificial intelligence based on the AI Act classification, the kind of risk you see, the unacceptable risk, the high risk, the limited risk, and the minimal risk. So probably they could look at some basic usage of AI, probably in the healthcare sector, which is also a high stake, risk, because a mistake in use of AI for health would cost a person's life. So probably you're using it for drug recommendation, treatment recommendation, or whatsoever, even to detect, diseases. It costs big thing, but maybe those ones that are minimal or those that have no risk. For instance, usage of AI in agriculture, it is arguably that there is no much risk in it. So in such instances where you know that pure regulation can really stand, maybe some sort of oversight, regulatory oversight, probably bodies that could really help, or expanding the scope of the current institutional oversight, expanding the scope of their work to include that. Because if we say that we want to, to create another regulatory oversight or another institutional oversight, we are creating more, we are duplicating, and in that case, we are spending more money to pay those people for their work. So we could actually, Nigeria could actually, expand the scope of the work of the current institutional oversight on several institutions to be able to adopt or to provide policies, industry use, all those rules that would really help. Aside from that, we could also leverage on capacity building. When I mean capacity building is not just teaching people how to build AI. Because when we talk about artificial intelligence, what comes to people's mind is, I want to build the next technology. But the issue is not building next technology, but balancing your innovation with societal values and societal needs. So what we should do is to, as much as people are, trainings are happening in the lawyers forum and the NBA, in the medical space, in the environmental space, all these are going on. I think trainings such as the use of artificial intelligence, the ethical use of AI should also be adopted in such trainings, so that instead of overburdening the government to get, which is not really a burden, right? Putting so much expectations, industry could actually do a lot of things to get its work, and also other things that would be maybe some sort of cross-border, international cooperation, where we could create some sort of relationship with other countries with, maybe not Africa, because Africa is still trying to get a grasp of their AI. I mean, what African countries are doing right now to come up with their strategies and policies. But we could do some sort of cooperation with countries that are really doing well in this. And finally, I also want to talk about, because this is also a source of law in Nigeria. which is judicial precedents. I feel that, aside from getting laws, I think judges in courts needs to also be abreast on how AI works, so that when issues on IP, issues on data protection, all these things are happening, and there is rulings of the court. Such rulings of the court can actually be used as a source of law in courts for other cases that are coming. So the judges needs to be aware. I really cannot speak about the current state of the judicial system in Nigeria concerning being awareness of AI. Right, I really can't speak about it, but I think a great awareness of the judicial system would really help. While the country is trying to put up an AI Act, the judicial system is also helping out to get it out, and also the legislative systems are also bringing out rules, bringing out the prescriptions, bringing out guidelines on usage. So together, through the collaboration of the three bodies, I think something really great can come out. You can fill the gap in regulatory in regulation of AI in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Obadara. That was quite insightful. Our next question, I think this would be addressed to Mr. David. What are the key AI-related risks that organizations in Nigeria should be aware of, and how can they mitigate these risks?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. My colleague Imadion mentioned some of those AI risks. And some of the prominent AI risks includes algorithm bias. That's a kind of a repetitive errors that creates a particular certain errors. As she said earlier, AI systems are fed with data, more like the usual usage, garbage in, garbage out. So whatever you feed into a particular AI solution or AI system is what brings out. So you have a situation whereby a certain set of data is feed into an AI system and bring out a particular a certain output, and sometimes erroneous output. So those are some of the AI risks that organizations need to put in mind, that AI systems are bound to have algorithm bias based on the systems or the data fed into it. Another risk that organizations also need to put at the back of their mind is the fact that data protection and data privacy, it's a front burner topic in relation to deployment of AI systems. And this is because of the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, data and AI goes together. They go together. So you have a problem of people, AI solutions infringing on private data, personal data of individuals and everything. And those are some of the things. And it's important that the Data Protection Act provides for mechanisms and laws and regulations in which organizations, data protection officers, data subject and data processors are supposed to be guided with. So it's important they also put that at the back of their mind. Also, it's the displacement of jobs, displacements in which AI, because of the fact that some of the roles in which human beings do are now being taken over by AI. So organizations need to put at the back of their mind that they need to retrain their staffs, tell them, oh, this is the advantages of AI, and where AIs need human oversight, they are needed to be, individuals who will take over such responsibilities. And lastly is also the malicious use of AI. Malicious use of AI is the problem we have now. We have issues of deepfakes where people use people's voices and put it, and AI simulates people's voices and appearances. So some of those things have those good sides, just as my colleague had mentioned, add some of those good sides, but also add some bad sides. And it is always very, very important, ethical AI and responsible AI. Principles of ethical AI and responsible AI are very, very important. The principles include accountability, fairness, transparency, and human oversight. So organizations have to make sure that whatever policies they are putting in place, whatever policies, regulations they are putting in place, they have to put it at the back of their mind that those principles of AI, ethical use of AI, are put in place. And also the data protection principles, data protection laws has to be put in place such that we don't have a problem whereby the data fed into AI is, infringing on personal data, and data processors and data controllers are, liable for such infringement. So it's important that they put that at the back of their mind, and also conducting regular risks and assessment, just as we conduct regular risks and assessment in our organization. Organization needs to begin to conduct regular risk assessment as it relates to AI deployment, such that they can able to identify the areas of in which AI might cause a lot of risks or problems to the organization structure, and put in a proper guidelines and proper framework such that those risks are discovered early on. And it's important that those policies are put in place, and also the general populace, the employees are also aware of these things, and so that in their practices, in what they are doing, they are aware of these AI principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. David, for your insightful comments. I heard you mention that while in mitigating these risks, that companies or organizations should ensure that they employ the principles of AI, which is accountability, fairness, and human elements. So thank you for that, Mr. David. Our next question is, I think when Emma Young was speaking, she made mention of deepfakes and how the deepfakes are being used prominently now. So I want to ask, how the generative use of AI in developing deepfakes, how can identity theft through the use of generative AI in developing deepfakes be curbed? This question is addressed to Emma Young. I don't know if I was clear enough.
Yes, you were. Okay, so I did mention deepfakes as a risk inherent in AI. And just in case someone wasn't here at the beginning, I'll just quickly explain what deepfakes are. So deepfakes are, my own words, a shadow of the real thing. So you could take my voice, you could take how I look, and then create something that looks like me, sounds like me, but I'm not the one. And, there is a good side to that, and there is a bad side to that. So the good side to that is that, industries that need those kinds of innovation can make use of it, like I mentioned, in the entertainment industry, where you can create stunt doubles just to augment actors in several scenes, right? But then there is and it's even used in things like customer care and virtual chatbots. So someone is chatting with you on a particular website, looks like the person, types like the person, just so that they can get to your issues quickly. So those are the good sides of deepfakes, right? So, but the bad side of deepfakes is the area of misinformation, impersonation, like you said, identity theft. And in the US, for instance, they had issues concerning election deepfakes, where certain candidates, were projected as saying things they didn't say. And I think that is quite risky. If it is not curbed, who knows, the extent of damage that can be done. So some of the ways that deepfakes can be curbed, I would say the first thing is legislation and policy, honestly. We are proposing the AI legislation, and I think that one thing that should be mentioned there is the prohibition of deepfakes for malicious uses. Okay, in the some other acts, like in the EU Act, it prohibits certain uses of AI, right? So I think when we have our own legislation or some other policies, that Mr. Kingsley mentioned that we can take on some other regulations before we get there. So these regulations and policies should prohibit malicious use of deepfakes. I think that's the starting point, right? And then I think the next thing is the adoption of technology that can identify deepfakes. So already there are technologies that help to detect deepfakes, that scan videos and images to check for funny features, and just to let you know that this isn't real. So organizations that deal with information or that this really affects should search out those technologies that can detect deepfakes and make use of them. So that's another way. I think even individuals can also download some of these apps and make use of them. I think another thing as well is social media and platform regulation. So I do know that X, formerly Twitter, had one time had a feature where it blocked certain deepfake content. So if we have regulations and policies mandating social media platforms to block the display of deepfake content that are malicious, I think that would also help as well. So we can, infuse that in our own local regulations, mandating social media players here in our country, to ensure that they have a policy in place to watch out for malicious use of deepfakes and then to block those contents from getting to users of those apps. Then the next thing that's also key is awareness, right? Awareness is important. Driving awareness of what many people don't know what deepfakes are, right? And they would see a video, they would see an image and think, oh, so this person can say something like this. Meanwhile, it wasn't the person. So the same way we have, cybersecurity awareness, there's a lot of talks about cybersecurity, a lot of talks around data protection, stakeholders in those industries are letting us know what to look out for in cyber attacks. They'll tell us things like don't click on suspicious emails, don't open that link. Excuse me. The same way that we should also have awareness for deep fakes. Okay. I know that there is an AI appreciation day every year, July 16. So on that day, organizations that are key players in AI and even the government can also send out information to speak to what deepfakes are. And I think that for individuals, there are easy ways to detect these things, right? So you could see that maybe the person's nose is not placed properly, or the voice is a little bit different, or the body movement is awkward. So there are first aid signs that you can use to detect these things, right? And then awareness. So businesses that create AI technologies should also be involved in driving awareness. And I think linked to this is also having a mindset of zero trust. So a zero trust mindset is a term in cybersecurity that tells people that you shouldn't just trust every single thing you see, but test it. Okay, so for instance, you see an email from an unknown sender, have a zero trust mindset. Your first instinct is not just to trust it because it looks like an email address from your friend, but question, look at the address. Does it have, is it wrong? Or the content, does it have funny content? So having that kind of mindset towards videos that you see online, pictures you see online would help you question as to whether this is right or wrong. So I think if we follow these steps, having policy legislations in place, driving awareness, even regulating apps and social media platforms, and also making use of technologies that can detect fakes, I think that eventually more people will be aware and there will be a less likely chance of people falling victims of identity theft.
Thank you so much, Emma Diong, and I quite agree with you, especially on the point of awareness, because you cannot fight what you don't know. So if people are not aware that there are deep fakes and these things are available, they wouldn't know how to combat such deep fakes and be able to detect when deep fakes have been used. So thank you so much, Emma Diong. While you were speaking, you mentioned something about the EU's AI Act. So this is a general question to all the speakers. Anyone can speak on this. So how do you foresee the European Union's AI Act influencing AI regulation globally? And what lessons can other jurisdictions, particularly Nigeria, learn from it?
Okay, permit me to latch on to that. Well, for me, the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act is a conversation starter for emerging economies. Nigeria, a case in point. I feel that there are a lot of lessons to be drawn from it. I can remember vividly the earlier speaker talking about the various categories of risk specified in the EU AI Act, which is quite fundamental. And I know that the CBN has been aggressive with several policies day in, day out regarding management of these levels of risk. Because I believe that artificial intelligence systems, they have a high level of risk, particularly security vulnerabilities. So for us as a nation, going beyond the AI strategy, we need to merge whatever regulation or legislation we intend to dole out with our cybersecurity framework. So it's not just to have a patchwork of laws scattered all over the place. There are some processes that will involve serious monitoring in terms of risk identification, risk management, to track these processes such that we do not record cases of violation, because artificial intelligence thrives on tons and tons of data. So you want to have sensitive data protected. For instance, my financial records with a financial institution, they are sensitive data, okay? Then also my health records. So I don't want this data going out to the public and this data being compromised. So if you have like machine learning algorithms that deal with processing huge data with respect to operations of financial institution, I know that sometimes in July this year, July 31st, the CBN rolled out some policies with respect to risk management functions. You know, there the CBN had specified that directors of the board of several companies now should have that required expertise in information technology, at least 2 non-executive directors. The idea of this is that those directors should be able to formulate and strategize with respect to the risk management functions of the company, such that when such companies begin to handle artificial intelligence systems and operations at a very high level, they already have, you know, an internal processes for monitoring, managing risk, identifying risk, you know, such that there is no implosion. So I feel that we need to draw inspiration from the EU AI Act in that direction. Also, with respect to ethics, I know that a lot of machine learning algorithms, like I said earlier, they process several difficult tasks, one of which is diagnosis. You know, you have a machine learning algorithm that can diagnose a particular ailment or disease. What if it goes wrong? So I still believe that sensitization is key. We have so many institutions investing heavily in AI. And if we check out the national framework, particularly the AI strategy, it talks about foundational infrastructure as its starting point, which is very key. We know that in Africa today, we are experiencing what we call the funding winter. A lot of companies do not have the funds, the required funds to leverage on technology. So we are entirely dependent on private capital. And I believe that capital is permanent. For us to be able to utilize capital and for us to be mobile, we need to be able to drive capital by means of reallocation. So what we need to do is to de-risk the entire landscape, de-risking in the forms of policy and in forms of, you know, financial de-risking. How do we achieve policy de-risking? Talking about corporate governance issues, talking about regulation, talking about collaboration, talking about, you know, incentivizing private investment for mobility of capital. Then financial de-risking, we need to organize different funding options for startup companies, for companies that are ready to go deep into AI. So I feel that these are very important points to take home, particularly with respect to your question regarding cybersecurity and artificial intelligence generally at the risk function levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oyefeso. I think we can all say we are learning so much from this webinar. I myself have gained so much insight and learned so many new things. And we're still going. There's still a lot more to unpack in this topic, and we still have a lot more questions. But this question is addressed particularly to Mr. Kingsley Obadara. In your earlier comment, you mentioned the need for building ethical AI. So my question is, what strategies can organizations employ to ensure that AI systems are aligned with their values and ethical principles? Because it's one thing to build ethical AI, it's another thing to ensure that this AI that is being built aligns with the organization's principles. So how can companies do this, bearing in mind the need for the building of ethical AI? Mr. Wadara.
Thank you very much. And I get to discuss or to chat with CEOs, directors of companies as part of my work as an ethicist. And the key questions people keep asking is how do they integrate with AI ethics into their system? And most of the feedbacks I've received is most companies have not really seen the need to integrate ethics in their work. In fact, most people have categorized ethics as a toothless bulldog that is just their backing, and there's really nothing to it. But there are several things that are at risk when a company does not, they don't have strategies for the implement of AI in the organization. And let's be sincere with ourselves. If an organization restricts the usage of artificial intelligence in an organization, if as an organization there's a restriction, I mean, you can only restrict what you see. There are times where staff have gone behind the doors or behind the fence to use AI. And this is because AI is irrespective of how it comes, either it comes as little as, as generative AI that like we are seeing, Gen AIs, or probably conversational tools, recommender systems, even as big as, getting robots. There are several things organizations can do. And part of what I would say is, first of all, implementing what I would call a robust AI governance structure. Now, AI governance structure goes beyond just having rules, do's and don'ts. It goes beyond it. Having a robust AI governance structure, first starting with what I would call as having an AI ethics committee. Now, AI ethics committee should, when you establish an AI ethics committee, it should be represented by what I would call a cross-functional, group of people in the organization. So let's say, for instance, it's a financial institution. There is hiring, there is operationals, there is financial transactions, there is other things, in fact, there is security and other things I cannot even mention because I'm not in finance space. So when you are having an AI ethics committee, you should be represented by all those things. What will AI ethics committee do? Is that it gives you, like, even the legals, having the legals represented there, it gives like a broad understanding of the possibilities of usage of artificial intelligence in the organization. Because whether you like it or not, right, and there are several risks that our organizations are exposed to if AI is used. For instance, your trade secrets is in the custody of somebody, either your design guy or probably one of those guys. Your security strategy is with somebody. The personal data of people is in the custody of somebody. So the HR guy, the human resources, is trying to hire, and then here's a legal guy trying to make his work easy, like inputting, agreements into Gen AIs. So you see, in fact, the finance guy is also there trying to analyze financial data and implementing it or uploading it in a generative AI for analysis. So we'll be deceiving ourselves if we think that it's not important. So having an AI ethics committee would be assigning leaders and a person from the C level. When I mean C level, either a director, a chief, the C level, either the CTO, CFO, COO, CPO, CEO, somebody must be there, right? Just so that when they are discussing, the things they are discussing are not just waste of time. Aside from having, an AI ethics committee, is also that organizations should have a personalized data protection strategy or data protection policy. And when you are putting in an organization-specific data protection strategy, you can tap inspiration from the NDP, Nigerian Data Protection Act, that we currently have, NDPA, right? You could tap inspiration from it so that you're able to create department-specific, rules of usage of AI in the organization. I would also advise that organizations should also, while trying to adopt, a structural structure for usage of AI in their system, they should also adopt what I'll call robust or integrate ethical consideration in their life cycle. Now, this really it determines on two things. Number one, the question the organization will ask themselves is, number one, are they building AI tool or are they procuring AI tool? Building might be, let's say you're an engineering company or whatever or institution you're using, and you want to build that are organization specific, the way banks do, where they build their own tool, right? So you have to answer the question. Or are you adopting, probably you're adopting ChatGPT, you're adopting Gemini, you're adopting Jira, or anything you're adopting. So if you understand the two things, then that would also determine, for instance, if you are building, then you look at what are the life cycle in that building process, starting from your pre-deployment, from your building, from your pre-modeling. Pre-modeling would involve your data gathering, data structure, and all those things, right? Down to your modeling session, your modeling, which is basically the building, and then to your deployment phase. And deployment will also include the usage. You have to create clear guidelines on data management, data processing, data usage, data storage, and data processing. So, because data is like the foundation of AI, right, of an algorithm. What I would also say as the final thing that organizations should do as part of this pipeline of integrating AI into the organization, or consideration before integration, would be to always conduct impact assessments. Now, when we talk about impact assessment, what comes to people's mind is risk on data. But do you know that there are primary risk when it comes to risk impact assessment? There are primary risk and secondary risk. Primary risks are where the risk directly affects a data subject. For instance, there is identity theft, just as Emedion mentioned, or there is loss of company's IP, loss of financial the finance of the company. Those are things that are directly related to people that you can identify. But what about the indirect risk? For instance, I think last month there was this issue where Character AI, a company called Character AI, their chatbot was indirectly traced to causing the death of someone, of a teenager. And the storyline was, the teenager was chatting, the AI model was fashioned in like of a particular movie, and where you can get on the tool and develop a customized character just to chat with you. And the guy got on it and he started using it. And at a point, the last chat he had with the AI tool before he shot himself was, he told the AI tool, "I'm coming home," and the AI tool told him, "Come home soon, come home fast, or I'm waiting for you." And after that chat, immediately after that chat, the guy pulled a gun and shot himself. So those are not primary direct impact, but those are secondary impacts on people. What about environmental impact of building algorithms, where GPUs, because basically you use GPUs to build algorithms. Those things consumes a lot of a lot of energy, and these things are things that have a long run on the sustainability of the environment, which also impacts people that lives there. So you have to make provisions for whether you're using direct risk or indirect risk. So putting all this together, organizations should be ready to implement. I would not, I would also not, talk, would not speak less of having a robust, ethics policy, or what I would call, ethics document that's really, because it fosters transparency. If you are using using artificial intelligence, to what extent do you use it as you are building? Right. For instance, you are a bank, you are a financial institution, or you are an health-based institution. You are using AI. To what extent do you use it for people, right? And if you are building, right, to what extent do you use this data, and how do people understand it? I think that's the way I could put it. So the usage and understanding, so that you can promote transparency. The document gives expandability, and then overall it could build trust in the organization for people using it, and you could reduce risk. And also, don't forget to always train people on the usage of this tool, because I mean, if a good tool, there must be a potential for it, but good tool must be in the hand of the right persons, where the person can use it well. And that way, organizations are able to integrate artificial intelligence, and it is used correctly by the people, and the risk are minimally reduced because of the regular impact assessment. Either you're using data impact assessment or any other thing you're using, just to make life easier for people and for yourself. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Kingsley. You have really touched on a lot of topics and a lot of things, impact assessments to support building ethical AI, and a lot of that. So we have talked about the risks of AI, how to mitigate these risks, the challenges, and the governance gaps. But then I believe that aside talking about all these things, there is a need to establish an effective governance structure to ensure that there's accountability. So this question is directed to Emma Diong. So how can companies establish effective AI governance structures to ensure accountability and transparency?
Yeah, thank you. I think Mr. Kingsley has touched on several things on AI ethics committees and documents and what should get in those. So I will certainly mention some of that because it's integrated, right? So the first thing, definitely, to establish AI governance, like he said, is to have a policy and governance document for the organization. I think this is particularly important for organizations that will be most hit by AI, or organizations that make use of a lot of AI in their work, or organizations that develop AI systems, right? So, but for organizations that will be most affected by AI, I think I mentioned that earlier. So, people in financial analysis, people in administrative tasks, human resources, computer programmers. So, it's important to have this policy document, right, to ensure that you are guided in your use of AI, and also that it is accountable and transparent. So this AI policy document certainly has to have these principles of artificial intelligence, which we have in our NAIS documents in Nigeria. So principles like fairness, transparency, accountability, right? And this really defines, it sets the tone of how our AI systems built. And I think that this goes to organizations that develop AI systems. So there's a question of, is your AI system transparent? So do we understand how you are training your AI models? Do we understand how you are patterning your models? So having a policy and governance document will define the principles that you must play by as a business. And it will also define what AI means to your organization if your organization makes use of a lot of of AI, right? So it's to define what it means, and then the acceptable uses of AI and the unacceptable uses. So, drawing from the EU Act, where the EU Act, mentions several risks, mentions unacceptable risk, it mentions high risk, right? It sets out the uses of AI that will amount to unacceptable risk. It sets out the uses of AI that will amount to high risk. And for those ones, it now puts in place compliance procedures that businesses and organizations must comply with to ensure that the risk is contained. So organizations can adopt that kind of model as well, to say this is the unacceptable use of AI that will amount to unacceptable risk or high risk or low impact, right? And this gives a clear idea of how they would deploy these systems. I think another thing that's important is also training of employees and board members. I think Mr. Kingsley mentioned our judges, and the fact that they need to understand some of these emerging areas like data protection, like IP infringement and AI, because already we have these cases in the United States. Okay, and it's just a matter of time before they come here to Nigeria. And when they come here, would it be a question of leaving it to ADR, saying, okay, what, let's just mediate this and see a middle ground? Or would the judges take up, the task of setting and defining the law in this regard? So it's important that as we're training judges, we're also training the staff and even board members in those organizations. And the reason why it's important to train board members is because they are the ones setting the vision of the organization, right? They're setting the pace, the tone of the organization, which then management passes down to employees. So if the board members are adverse to AI systems, if they don't want to hear anything about it, then it would affect the way the organization works with AI. Okay, they might have a closed mind. But where we have periodic training of employees and the board members, it would drive a warmer approach or a warmer embrace to these AI systems. And when this is done, definitely things like accountability and transparency will not be traded on. Then another thing that is important for accountability and transparency is auditing, right? And I think Mr. Kingsley mentioned impact assessment. And I think my colleague as well, David, mentioned that it's something that you can't skip on. If we're talking about accountability, who is going to keep these AI systems accountable? How do we determine that there is a fair use, of these systems? So it's important that you have periodic internal auditing of your systems, right? And I think I also made a recommendation earlier, which is having reporting to the regulator, when there is a defined regulator of these systems, right? So letting the regulator, and even within your organization, to discuss how did we use AI in this year? How did it impact us in this year? Is there any wrong use of AI by our organization? How can we better deploy it to serve our communities? So it's important, right? So trainings for staff and board of directors, auditing and reporting, and having an AI policy governance document are things that businesses should look at to ensure that its use of AI is accountable and transparent.
Thank you so much, Emadion. You have really touched on the question and touched on a lot of areas. So we have talked about risks, we have talked about adopting governance structures, we have talked about impact assessments and ensuring that AI systems are aligned with ethical AI. All these things, and all speakers, while everyone was speaking, there was constant mention or constant reference to regulation and policy. And sometimes this can come across as trying to stifle the environment, trying to stifle innovation, where there are a lot of regulations and policies surrounding this. So then my question is, how can regulatory bodies in Nigeria balance the need to promote innovation with the need to protect citizens from potential AI-related harms? Mr. David, this question is directed to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So we mentioned a lot of things around AI deployments by organizations and all that. all this still boils down to what is the regulator saying, what is the provisions, what are the innovative solutions the regulators are providing. And there's always this issue of balancing innovations with what exactly is going to be harmful for the general populace or for the Nigerian citizens. So the regulators are tasked with the duties of trying to make sure that there is a balance between innovation and also creating an enabling environment for people to innovate, to use AI, to deploy AI solutions in their mechanisms, in their processes, and also to make sure that as much as they deploy these AI solutions, also there is no ample effect on the general Nigerian populace. And I would think that some of the ways the regulators can create this balance is, first of all, by creating a regulatory sandboxes in a sense whereby organizations, companies are allowed to test AI solutions, test AI systems within a controlled environment. Something the CBN did with fintechs, they're able to create solutions, create innovative means of using AI within a controlled environment and provide such guidelines, such regulations for them to be able to make use of these, create a sandbox for them to be able to deploy these AI solutions and discover any risks or anything that it poses early on. Another thing regulators can do also is to invest in education and awareness. That cannot be overemphasized. This is because the Nigerian populace is still unaware of some of the things AI can do. It's just the educated minds, and begin to see some things. People begin to use ChatGPT. 2 years, 3 years ago, ChatGPT was not a thing, but people are beginning to see that, there are ways and means in which you can deploy the use of AI for us to be able to achieve our tasks and achieve it better. So there is need for much awareness. There is need for much investment in education. The regulators have to go all out and tell people, this is what the AI has come to do, and these are the harmful effects of AI. So people are able to guide against, what is the harmful effect of AI? What is the useful and acceptable means of AI? So it's important that regulators invest into education and awareness, and also equip policy makers, industry professionals, and also the knowledge and skills to be able to understand the complexities of AI. Another thing is also the fact that there is need for a lot of collaborations. The regulators have to, we don't have a specific regulators that guide their activities and everything, but we have the Ministry of Innovation, Communication, Innovation, and Digital Economy. They need to do a lot of collaboration with international organizations. For instance, you have the EU Act. The European Union is always ahead in terms of technology advancements and in terms of regulatory requirements. And so the Nigerian government, the regulators need to put this in mind and collaborate with organizations in Europe, in the EU, and look at what they have done and also draw lessons from there. For instance, the EU Act provides the EU Act is largely inch or responsible AI. Ethical AI. First of all, the EU provides that due diligence must be done for any deployment of AI solutions. It also provides for verifications of data, verifications of decisions of AI, and also lastly provides for the use of human input to supervise. That's to show accountability in AI systems. So Nigerian government has to collaborate, the Nigerian regulators has to collaborate with other countries to establish best practices in AI regulation. And also lastly, just as we said earlier, it cannot be overemphasized, we need to have a defined regulation, robust data protection and privacy regulations that meet up with the complexity and the rapid evolution of AI. And because we don't even know to what extent the use of AI, we only have the knowledge of what we can do at this point. And the way technology goes, technology evolves with time and seasons, and so that regulators will not begin to play catch up, they need to develop a futuristic solution such that problems, risks, other risks that we have not identified at this moment can be discovered early on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. David, for your comments. And I think a key point in what you mentioned is the need for awareness in Nigeria and for the relevant regulatory bodies to collaborate with various sectors so that Nigerians can become aware of AI and how to use it, and also to help them and protect themselves from AI-related harms. So we have been talking about regulation, policy, and all of that. And while Mr. David was speaking, he made mention of the fact that while we are trying to build up Nigeria's AI legal system or legal framework, there is a need to ensure that we have an understanding of what's happening or what has happened, so we are not reactive in our laws. Instead, we are proactive and we're not trying to play catch up. So I want to ask Mr. Oyefe, so this question is directed to you, sir. Drawing on what Mr. David has said, what aspects of the use of AI as well as AI policy and regulation do you anticipate as a subject of litigation in the near future? As I believe that an understanding of this would help Nigerian regulators and policymakers when drafting AI legal frameworks to ensure that they are not playing catch up and they are proactive in drafting out these legislations. Mr. Oyefeso.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me say quickly, the speakers, they had earlier talked about some of the challenges. So indirectly, that's also a major challenge. And straight on, I would essentially mention intellectual property and copyright. You know, we have a situation where we are trying to achieve that transition from weak AI to general AI and super artificial intelligence. But at this point, we are still grappling with that transition from weak AI to general AI. So a lot of these AI systems, the training models are based on copyright issues, because we have situations where people have gone to court to challenge ChatGPT's, a case in point, for instance, that most of their training models and all of that are guilty of copyright infringement. A lot of lawsuits are replete all over the place. We may not be able to exhaust all of these things. We have Suno, Udo, a lot of these music AI apps, you know, they are subject of litigation. Of course, there's this issue about the SAG-AFTRA that was recently resolved, that's talking about the entertainers in the United States of America. They were very curious, particularly with respect to some of these AI models that have been allegedly involved in mining of their works, copyright infringement claims, you know, and what have you. They went back and forth. It was topsy-turvy on the issue of how such rights ordinarily should be deployed. At some point, they had to get into a situation where there was an agreement in principle that, you know, if you have to do your double stunts and all of the activities that will involve that copycat syndrome of stealing other people, allegedly stealing other people's work to train your AI models, then you have to come to us. We have to come to an agreement. We have to be able to agree, and these agreements must be tamper-proof. So a lot of these things are all over the place. In Nigeria, like I said initially, there's still that knowledge deficiency, and there's lack of funds for investable projects that really train people. We need to have co-pilots and other pilot programs to really train the youth, because AI majorly resonates with the youth in Africa. Because in Africa, there's this general syndrome that, look, we don't need new technology. You know, we cannot afford new technology. We are not ready for new technology. So at every point in time, for us to really achieve that inflection point in the era of technology, we really need to sit back and review all of these processes. The issue of SAG-AFTRA I mentioned, that's still very recent. It's still a burning issue. We can replicate that. We can learn from that and begin to prioritize streamlining our laws in such a manner that we accommodate all of these issues that could come up in our conversation with respect to AI. You know, we talk about generative AI and super artificial intelligence, and I tell you that there's this argument that AI cannot achieve sentience, meaning that you cannot have a system, or you cannot have a machine or a robot, for instance, that can exercise human judgment, talking about emotions and all of that. So we are still stuck in the era of machine intelligence, deep learning, and all of these things. So there are still challenges. How do you intend to achieve, that outcome where your predictions, particularly with respect to your algorithms, will be accurate? So they talk about the gradient descent and the loss function and all of that, how to minimize your errors. So it's still work in progress for me. And I believe that essentially we need to look at our copyright legislation, the framework. Recently, I published a book, Mellofiles in the Metaverse, where I talked about this issue of young people, artists, and the entire system having a national legislation, for instance, on music, like where you have the Music Modernization Act that will accommodate issues relating to the metaverse, issues relating to artificial intelligence, copyright, and all of these novel and evolving areas in the realm of artificial intelligence. So basically, I still foresee a lot of litigation, particularly with respect to intellectual property and copyright infringements. And these cases are evolving. We talk about open AI, decentralization, and where we are going, super intelligence, where we believe that AI will be able to do everything and achieve everything that humans can do, and even better than humans. So we have a situation where right now you have countries like China, for instance, investing in quantum computers. They have what you call the Jiaozhang, which is a super quantum computer that can perform tasks faster than the normal classical computers or supercomputers that you have. The National AI Strategy, for instance, talks about AI cluster, saying that we should invest heavily in computing technology. So I believe that those are the areas we should focus on rather than really hallucinating about, what AI is going to do for us. We need to prepare. We need to be prepared, and we need to be serious about artificial intelligence. And we need to see that the Ministry of, like my colleague rightly said, the Ministry of Information, Communication, and Digital Economy, they have this digital literacy initiative that they do, whereby they train, a huge number of youths and, empower them to take up artificial intelligence projects, startups that would have projects linked to artificial intelligence. We also have the moonshot cabal and all of these things, whereby there's a lot of experimentation with respect to the risk involved in artificial intelligence and so many things. So I believe that we are scratching the surface. We are trying to grapple with these things, and the level of understanding is still very low. So for us to really get it right, from the onset, we need to sit down, get the various stakeholders to collaborate. Then we now begin to look at our laws, like the Data Protection Act that we've talked about, the privacy issues with respect to data protection. That's my right to privacy and my right to have my information protected. So how do you now harness these rights without infringing, on this right? So do I voluntarily give you the right to access this data? How am I sure that once I release this data, I can trust you with this data, and this data will not be compromised for other malicious purposes? So you have the GDPR, you have our intellectual property laws, and you have several other laws, trade secrets, and all of these laws. So it's beyond mere talk. Talk is cheap, they always say, but we need to settle down, hit the ground running, and be very deliberate about all of these issues. In Nigeria, they have the 3MTT agenda. Of course, that's also powered by the Ministry of Information, Communication, and Digital Economy. The idea is to leverage on the intellectual strengths of the youth in order for them to be able to embark on some of these artificial intelligence projects. One other point that I will mention is that with respect to the energy demands for AI, an earlier speaker talked about it. That's another area that we mustn't overlook, because we have a situation whereby in our energy landscape, we still have very huge demand for fossil fuels, whereas we're talking about reduction of carbon footprints and all of these things. So how do we reconcile all of these issues? Because artificial intelligence thrives on huge energy demand, and where we have a situation where the countries in Africa are still grappling with domestic fossil fuels, how do we make that transition to clean energy in terms of the net zero levels we intend to achieve by 2060? So all of these issues, we have to merge them, consolidate them in order to achieve super results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oyefeso. I think a major point in all you have said is that there is a need for dedicated efforts on the part of regulatory agencies to harness the intellectual property of the youths in addressing AI concerns in Nigeria. We've spent a lot of time discussing this topic, and I can see some questions in the chat box. So I think we should head on to the chat box and address those questions. So this question is from Precious. She asks, how do you think AI can change the data privacy landscape in the next 5 years? If any of the speakers can answer this question, said, how do you think AI can change the data privacy landscape in 5 years?
Okay, so as I've mentioned earlier, um, AI is evolving every day. AI is evolving. AI solutions, AI systems are being deployed every day. So data protection, data privacy issues will always be a front burner topic in relation to deployment of AI solutions. And this is because of the fact that the earlier established fact that AI lives on data, AI, functions on data. So we foresee a situation whereby in the next 5 years, some of our AI laws, our good national data protection laws, might not be able to catch up with the ever evolving AI solutions and AI systems. So we foresee a situation, we foresee a future whereby in the next 5 years, we might begin to put in regulations, regulators might begin to put in regulations to address AI specific data privacy concerns, maybe data security concerns, data security as relates to AI. And what we have now, according to some school of thought, is still a generic data protection laws. We'll see a future whereby we would have regulators, rolling out regulations that address AI specific data privacy concerns. So it's a whole lot of issue, and I'm sure people are watching, international organizations are watching, and people are looking at how these things are affecting our decision, are affecting our lifestyles. And I'm sure that in the next 5 years, if our 5 years might be a lot of time, in the next 5 years, we might begin to see regulations that affect data privacy concerns that relate to AI. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other thoughts to this question. In specific, I see that in the next 5 years, there are impacts we have on our data protection regulation. For instance, which is very, very important, is now we are talking about personal data. I mean, data of an identifiable person. But in specific, AI is now having impact on what we call indigenous people and their data. What does indigenous people mean? Indigenous people are people that basically would say in a layman interpretation, with people that are probably first settlers, in a particular place, right? And those people have their culture, they have their story, they have their rights, they have their tradition. You see, these people, most of them are not on the internet to tell their stories, and people tell their stories, and AI in long run, when wrongly used, might start telling other stories about them. There are questions on people even making their data for commercial use, and they now coming up and demanding for their data, the ownership of their data. So I see that in the long run, there might be expansion of the data protection to include data for indigenous people, data for marginalized community, in fact, specific data on company data, because I am looking at it from the legal spectrum of what who a person is in law. A person, either a corporate person, or you are an identifiable person. I mean, a human being, if there is anyone like that, a human being. So I see that the landscape of data or interpretation, or the legal interpretation of data, will be expanded to meet with different personalities identified in law, or different persons identified in law, and then specifically including how AI affects these people. And I feel that that's what's really going to happen in the coming days, because all those people, not just unidentifiable persons affected by by biases, companies are affected, corporate organizations, people, a lot of people are affected. So I feel that these are things that my projections, in the coming years, that will shape, the legal landscape of data protection, in the coming years in Nigeria or even Africa at large.
Thank you so much, Mr. David and Mr. Kingsley, for your comments. There's another question, and this was directed specifically to Ms. Emma Diong. Mr. Charles asks that algorithm bias is a major issue that must be looked into. Please, what are the measures that can be put in place to ensure that the right information is imputed into the AI system? Ms. Emma Diong.
Okay, so for those who may not understand, so algorithm bias comes from a place, like we've established webinar, that AI tools are fed with large amounts of data, right? So they collect data from people, they collect data from systems, and feed into the this AI system. So it's from there that these AI systems give you certain outputs. So if the data fed into these AI systems are biased, right, what it's going to produce will be biased. However, there are certain measures that can be put in place to combat this. And I think the first one is having diverse and representative data. So not just feeding AI systems with data that represents a particular tribe or a particular race, or a particular age group, but diversifying what you feed into these AI systems, capturing as many groups as possible. And I think flowing from that also is having bias audits. So within your organization, and this is for organizations that develop AI systems. So having maybe a subgroup within the organization that checks for biases, that checks the AI systems for these biases, and even going beyond your internal groups, having an independent third party come in to audit your AI tools to ensure that it is free from bias. This is similar to where you have independent auditors coming in to audit your financial systems, your risk management systems. So beyond your internal auditing, also inviting independent third parties to check for this. And I think that this will be possible if we have policies in place or regulations in place mandating regular auditing, because some organizations, might not really care about things like this. But if we have regulators that mandate periodic auditing, and periodic auditing for certain things like biases, I think that would be important, would help as well. Then I do know that in Nigeria, for instance, our national AI strategy documents mention some principles of AI that must be adhered to, and one of it is transparency. So transparency as an AI principle mandates businesses that develop AI tools to be transparent about how their AI tools are being trained. Okay, so letting the regulators know what exactly did you use to train your data sets, and this even goes beyond bias. It also goes into ensuring that you are not infringing on someone else's IP rights in training your data model. So transparency and explainability is also important. Then another thing that's also important is what is called human in the loop elements. So when you have decisions made that are AI made, right? You have your AI systems making decisions, and it's important for organizations to take a step further to have a human element to auditing these things. So for instance, let's say you're having a hiring process and you rely on AI to make your decisions for you, and somehow you find out that in the outputs, these AI systems are favoring a set or a group of people such that it's questionable to you as a hiring manager. It's important that you step in bring that human face into it to checkmate and use your human reasoning as well to say, okay, I think there is bias here. How can we balance it? And that's why AI has its limits. It's really can't think like humans, so it's not going to take over everything that we do. So even when you rely on AI to make your decisions for you, it's important that you also fact check and you also ensure that there are no biases in those decisions. Then there's also something final that I would say is bias mitigation. So there are certain machine learning tools that are called adversarial machine learning that can be used to fight these biases. So organizations that develop these AI systems or organizations that make use of these AI systems to make their decisions, they can implement adversarial machine learning tools, okay, to get into the system and to checkmate, for biases that may occur, right? So that would help you make, better informed decisions. So it's important in order to fight these biases. It's important to have internal auditing of your AI systems to check against biases, and even contracting an independent third party to do this for you. It's also important to be transparent, because as time goes on, what's going to happen is we're going to have regulators and policymakers demand for accountability and transparency. So businesses that develop these AI systems have to be transparent from the start, what data they're using to train their AI models. And it's also important for these businesses. I think one thing that the auditing will do is that it would ensure that you have you get data from a wide variety, like I mentioned. So organizations might not be aware that they are feeding their AI systems with biased data. So ensuring that they capture a wide range of group is also important. And then making use of tools like adversarial machine learning to fight the biases within the systems before they get out.
Thank you so much, Miss Emadiong. And wow, we've really had a long and interesting discussion on today's topic, legal perspectives on AI, addressing risk gaps and governance challenges. And all the speakers have weighed in and put in their comments and their opinions and their thoughts on this topic, and which has enabled us to have a robust and insightful discussion. Well, there are some other questions in the chat box, but I think those have been addressed earlier by the speaker, so we would not be taking them. I think at this stage we have come to the end of this webinar. We've had a really insightful session with all the speakers, and all the speakers have spoken expertly on the various aspects of this topic. This webinar was brought to you by Wigwe and Partners in collaboration with Business Day. If you'd like to connect with any of the speakers, you can check them out on LinkedIn and connect more with them. So thank you all to all our speakers, everyone who has weighed in on this discussion, and the audience who have stayed this long to listen to this conversation. Thank you all so much. And if you'd like to have a replay of this session, you can check it out on Business Day TV on YouTube. It would be posted there shortly. Thank you all once again to our speakers and the audience, and do have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Very much.